What's going on, guys? Dots here, and today I'm bringing you guys a beginner overview to the Demon Hunter class in World of Warcraft, giving you an introduction to the class and some beginner setups that you can use to get started and get used to the class and its mechanics. Now, this guide is going to assume that you have at the very least a basic understanding of World of Warcraft, but are just unsure about how a class plays and whether or not it is right for you. So let's get into today's video covering the Demon Hunter class. Demon Hunters, also known as the Illidari, are the disciples of Illidan's Stormrage. They embrace fell and chaotic magics, believing that these dangerous magical forces are necessary to challenge the Burning Legion. Wielding demonic powers, they've also come to develop demonic features themselves that resemble the demons that they've slain. Demon Hunters made a pact to fight fire with fire, using chaos and demonic magic against those who originally wielded these forces. They also ritually blind themselves in exchange for spectral sight that enables them to better sense their prey if they are stealth or trying to hide behind walls, wearing their trademark blindfold to cover up these self-inflicted wounds. They wield warglaives in battle and call upon demonic magic to augment their abilities while also wearing leather armor. Demon Hunters have two specializations: Vengeance, which is their tank specialization, and Havoc, which is their damage dealing specialization. Both of the Demon Hunter specs have a focus on melee damage and high mobility, and they specialize in strong area of effect burst damage. Demon Hunters also have the ability to double jump with a third click of your jump button as well. You can also spread your wings and glide to safety, which, not gonna lie, gets pretty addicting once you start using it. A Demon Hunter's primary resource is going to be Fury, which they build up with certain attacks and spend with others. In addition, like I mentioned, they wear leather armor. They use agility as their primary stat to augment their physical and chaos attacks, and utilize a wide variety of weapons, including warglaives, fist weapons, one-handed axes, and swords to deal their damage. Something to keep in mind when creating a Demon Hunter is that only Blood Elves and Night Elves can play as Demon Hunters, so that is something to keep in mind when choosing your faction for your character. But now that we have a brief summary of the class out of the way, let's get into the specs and what they have to offer. Now, the following builds that I'm going to cover are going to be tailored to new players, looking to make your rotation as easy and straightforward as possible, while also adding as few additional skills as I can to your action bars, when I'm able to, focusing a lot more on passives. Thankfully, when it comes to Demon Hunter, since the class is pretty straightforward, the difference between like a new player build and an advanced talent selection really isn't all that different. So like I said, as many of the Demon Hunter's abilities are actually passives, that you get from your talent tree. However, if you're looking for a more advanced guide, there are plenty of websites out there that have write-ups more tailored toward endgame raids, Mythic Plus, and rated PvP. And just to reiterate, this guide is more tailored towards brand new players to WoW. To import any of the builds shown in this video, click the talent pane on your menu in World of Warcraft, then the drop-down menu that you can see at the bottom left, and click import. And then you can import any of the strings for the talent builds that I have linked in the description below. Now, starting off with our first spec, we have Havoc, the damage dealing spec. Havoc has a bit more of a complicated spec path that you can follow that more experienced players tend to take, that utilizes a ton of movement to basically give them augmentations to deal extra damage. But I personally think that for a new player, it can be a bit complex and just generally a bit much for someone newer to the game. So this build focuses on keeping you in melee range and dealing maximum damage while there, so you can use your extra mobility to get in and out of the fight as you see fit. We will also take some talents to give us some extra healing while going through our damage rotation, making our offensive pressure also give us a defensive boost. This build focuses on giving us a lot of passive boosts like I mentioned earlier, and I'll be going over any active abilities that we get in our rotation section. But to download this build to your WoW character, use the import string in the description below, and you will be able to basically put this right onto your character. Now, going over the rotation of this build, there are going to be basically a bunch of abilities that you just try to use on cooldown, and I'm going to list the priority in which you want to cast them. And you could also see a written version on the screen, which I will do because I didn't do that in last year's videos. So we are going to cast the Hunt on cooldown, one of our bigger burst cooldowns. We also have Glaive Tempest, going to be using that on cooldown. Eye Beam we are going to also use on cooldown, followed up by Essence Break. Now, the reason we do that is because Essence Break buffs the damage of our Blade Dance, and Blade Dance gets also buffed when we are in our Metamorphosis Demon form, which Eye Beam puts us into. So going Eye Beam followed by Essence Break will put us into Demon form, and give us that boost to Blade Dance, basically doubling our, how much extra augmentations Blade Dance has on it. So you go I-Beam, Essence Break, followed up by Blade Dance. You then use Immolation Aura on cooldown, and then once you have all that Fury at your disposal, you're just going to basically spam Chaos Strike until you can't use it anymore, and then you're going to use Fell Blade on cooldown to generate Fury. Now, we also have a talent that is going to basically have a chance to reset the cooldown on Fell Blade, so definitely keep an eye on your action bars for when Fell Blade glows so that you can press it again and continually generate that Fury. Now, otherwise, we're going to be using Throw Glaive, but we have something cool with Throw Glaive in our build. Now, we have a talent called Fodder to the Flame that can summon a demon, and when we hit it with Throw Glaive, we get AoE damage and healing. Like I said, this is from our tree that gives us our damaging abilities a chance to call forth a demon, and hitting it with Throw Glaive instantly kills it and gives us a big boost of damage and heals us, like I mentioned earlier, making Throw Glaive a much more enjoyable part of our rotation instead of just being kind of a boring filler. In terms of some notes about our offensive cooldowns, you're going to want to pop your Metamorphosis and keep going through your rotation that I listed above. However, try to time your Metamorphosis around when you have I-Beam on cooldown, because I-Beam already does put us into demon form. In addition, making sure that we have Fury in reserve is a smart idea so that we can make sure that we can use as many powered Chaos Strikes as possible when we are in that Metamorphosis form. You also do have Consume Magic, which is a purge, and you can use that to purge and remove helpful effects from your enemies. In terms of defensive notes, be sure to collect any soul fragments that spawn on the ground, as they not only generate Fury, but they also heal you. These are typically spawned when you kill enemies. If you're taking a lot of damage, you're also going to want to pop Blur to reduce damage taken by 20% for 10 seconds, while also increasing your dodge chance by 50%. Also, if you find that you or an ally is in need of defense, you can use Darkness to give you and your allies a 20% chance to avoid all damage for 8 seconds. Also, when outnumbered, use CCs like Chaos Nova and Imprison to help crowd control your enemies. You can also use your strong mobility with Fell Rush and Vengeful Treat to help avoid damage and keep opponents at a distance or gap close to where they are. In terms of a stat priority for Havoc Demon Hunters, we're going to obviously be focusing on Agility, which is our main stat, and then in terms of secondary stats, it's Critical Strike, followed by Haste, followed by Mastery, followed by Versatility. Now, moving into the tank spec, the Vengeance Demon Hunter. Vengeance Demon Hunter, similarly to Havoc Demon Hunter, has a build that can add a bit more complexity by using an additional ability known as Spirit Bomb, which consumes some of the Shattered Souls that are summoned from dealing damage to your enemies with certain abilities. Now, don't get me wrong, that build is really good, but I personally think that for a new player, it could be a bit better to reserve those Spirit Shards for healing, those Shattered Souls for healing, instead of spending them on Spirit Bomb. So this build does remove that talent to make our Immolation Aura instead last longer with an extra point in Agonizing Flame, where most people just typically only place one. Just like with the Havoc setup, this build again is going to focus on giving us a lot of passive boosts, and I'll be going over any active abilities in the rotation section. If you want to import this build onto your character, use the import string for the talent build listed in the description below. You also can, if you want to try that Spirit Bomb style, remove that extra point from the Agonizing Flame talent and place it back in Spirit Bomb, and then you can also move the talent from Calcified Spikes into Fallout so that you generate a bit more soul fragments so that, Spirit Bomb isn't consuming as many. But again, for this guide, I wanted to try to make the build a little bit more beginner friendly. Now, moving into our rotation, guys, again, it's going to be a lot of similarities to Havoc. You're just using a lot of stuff on cooldown. So first priority, again, is going to be using the Hunt on cooldown, followed by utilizing Soul Carver on cooldown, Fell Devastation on cooldown, and now after that, that's a lot of our big damage, right? After that, we're going to be wanting to focusing on using abilities on cooldown and making sure we're not capping our Fury. So Immolation Aura, Fracture, and Sigil of Flame should all be used on cooldown. But something you do need to keep an eye on is making sure that your Fury isn't going to cap. So you're going to want to use Soul Cleave to consume soul fragments and spend your Fury. So with Immolation Aura, Fracture, and Sigil of Flame, basically use them until you're about to Fury cap, and then spend it with Soul Flame, and then go back to generating Fury with those abilities, or with Soul Cleave, excuse me, then spend it with Soul Cleave. It's just that builder-spender kind of relationship, and then use those first 3 abilities I mentioned when they come back off of cooldown. Now, again, similarly to the Havoc spec, we also do have the Fodder to the Flame talent, so when we do summon that, we are going to want to hit it with Throw Glaive to kill it, deal some damage, and heal us. Again, this kind of makes Throw Glaive a bit more fun to use in my opinion, versus it just becoming a boring filler that we use when we can't use anything else. And I'm sure you can tell from me describing the rotation that a huge part of Vengeance's gameplay is going to be Fury management, very similar to Havoc, but I feel like Vengeance kind of has to worry about it as well as summoning the soul fragments a little bit more, and the builder-spender relationship between building Fury and Soul Fragments and then spending them with Soul Cleave. So it might take a little bit of time to learn that relationship, but with enough practice and following this guide, I do have confidence that you guys can do it. Now, some additional offensive notes for the spec. Fell Devastation is your primary offensive skill along with Sigil of Flame. Use those when you really want to increase your damage. Also remember that Fell Devastation does give you Metamorphosis, which is a nice defensive boost. Speaking of which, Metamorphosis, Fiery Brand, which we focus on a lot for this build, and Demon Spikes are your main forms of defense. Use them in a pinch when you feel you really need the defense, or preemptively if you know a big attack is coming in, or you predict that you are going to be taking quite a lot of damage. Now, our stat priority for the Vengeance Demon Hunter, similarly to Havoc, is going to be obviously focusing on main stat as our first stat, but where the difference is with the secondary stats, we're going to have Haste, followed by Versatility, followed by Critical Strike, followed by Mastery. But guys, that is going to be it for my updated Demon Hunter beginner guide for the Dragonflight expansion. I tried to make these guides a little bit more simple and quick than the ones that I made for Shadowlands, as well as display more information on the screen. So please, if you guys did watch those videos for the last expansion, let me know what you thought about this one in the comment section below. I do plan on once again making a beginner guide for every single class and spec in the game, including the new Evoker class. So be sure, if you do want to keep an eye on those, to subscribe to my YouTube channel here so you never miss a video, and of course turn on that bell. I also do plan on at some point throwing these guides up on my website dotsgaming.com for a written version, so definitely keep an eye on the website for when those come out, but I'll also post on my community tab when those are released. So I appreciate you guys stopping by this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, leave a like on it. Any questions, feel free to leave it below. So guys, thank you so much for stopping by today's video. I do really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all next time.